Vamos então dar início às intervenções dos nossos keynote speakers de hoje. Eu começava por apresentar Fiona Iglesias, atualmente representante britânica no European Educational Repositories Network, para além de ser membro do Information Standards Board for Education Skills and Children's Service, Special Interest Group for Digital Contact and Vocabularies. Colabora com a Northwestern Learning Grid desde 2006 e passou os últimos 3 anos a desenvolver o Banco Nacional de Dados de Recursos do Reino Unido. Durante 12 anos foi docente na Argentina e na Austrália. Fiona, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you don't mind, but my presentation is going to be in English. I hope everybody is okay with that. Could I first of all say thank you very much to the organisers of the event, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here. It's a pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the National Digital Resource Bank, which is a project that started in 2007 in the UK. And it's all about digital content and use in the classroom. First of all, a little bit of background. In 2007, when this project was established, in the UK, we had the department, at the time it was called Department for Children's Schools and Families. It's now called Department for Education, and we had BECTA. And those people who know anything about what's happening in the UK will know that we no longer have BECTA. So we just have a number 1 there instead of 2. We had 10 regional bodies. I actually belong to one of the regional bodies. The 10 regional bodies together make up what is called the National Education Network, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We have 150 local authorities, 25,000 schools, this is just public schools, and 428,000 teachers and approximately 8 million learners. So this is just in the schools sector, not talking about colleges or universities. That group of people, back in 2007, had done an awful lot of work, and there were some great things happening. That since 2000, there'd been a lot of investment in ICT in education, and by 2007, we'd built up some great things. So things that were working really well. We had a highly developed infrastructure, which was being expanded to universal access. Computers for learners, computers in the schools, internet in the schools. Everybody had access to the internet in schools. All schools were connected to the National Education Network. So this is the backbone, the internet backbone that runs throughout the UK, connecting all schools and colleges and universities on a central network. All schools had a learning platform. They didn't have the same one. They had lots and lots of different ones, and again, I'll talk about that in a minute, but all schools we knew had a learning platform. And what we had was an infrastructure that was ready to share digital resources for teaching and learning. The other thing that we'd done really well in 2007 was create digital resources. So we had lots and lots and lots of digital resources. There'd been lots of investment in resources for commercial providers, for publicly funded projects. Lots of effort and work had gone into creating some really exciting and some fantastic digital resources. And these had come from commercial companies, local authorities, city learning centres, government agencies. People like museums and galleries were creating great digital content for, to go into schools. Regional bodies, specialist schools, charities. Charities were another source of really interesting digital resources. So not just the traditional suppliers of content, but additional suppliers of content were creating interesting, interactive digital resources. So everything looked great. But in fact, if you looked a little bit more closely, you would see that we weren't as strong as we thought we were, and everything wasn't quite as it seemed. And something was going wrong, because despite this fantastic infrastructure and all this wonderful content, teachers weren't getting access to resources, and there wasn't an awful lot happening in the classroom. And so we decided to have a look at why that was happening. And what we found was that there was no coherent gathering of educational resources. So the charities were doing great content, but struggling to get that to the teachers. Industry creating great content, but not getting it to the teachers. Agencies creating fabulous content, but all on different websites, all in different locations, and that content wasn't being gathered into a central location. We had inadvertently created barriers to sharing by introducing learning platforms. The learning platforms that we have in the UK, in my region alone, we have 13 different learning platforms deployed, and there was no common standardization between them, or where there was a standard had been specified, it wasn't done in such detail that there was any real interoperability between systems. So teachers who were naturally comfortable sharing resources found that suddenly they couldn't. They'd put resources into the learning platform, but they couldn't share them with their friend who was on a different learning platform. They couldn't move from one school to another school and take their resources with them because the resources were locked and stuck in the learning platform. So we'd created a barrier to sharing. We had no effective resource discovery service. Teachers were still going to Google, doing a search for a resource, getting 2 million results, and by page 10, they'd given up. They weren't finding the resources they needed. And the result was that we were failing to achieve the economic and pedagogic benefits from this investment that we'd made in infrastructure and in content. So the regional body that I work for decided that we would do something about this, that we needed an overarching strategy to pull all of this activity together and make some sense of it for the teachers in the schools. And what we decided we needed was a national digital resource bank and resource discovery service. What we wanted to do was connect the teachers, the learners, the users to all that fantastic content that was out there and that had been produced. And that's what we did. We decided that we would focus on free content, so content that was licensed under open educational licenses, mostly Creative Commons, and things that we knew that teachers would want and that they'd use. So we focused on collecting resources from publicly funded projects and initiatives, from the charities, industries, and also international partnerships, because we were very aware that there was a lot of activity happening across Europe. We weren't the only ones in this situation, and it was important to link in to all that activity so that we could all benefit and maximize from investment, not just in the UK, but across Europe. And how we wanted to get that out. So that was the content that would come into the system, and then getting the content out, we knew that we needed to have a very flexible and multifaceted way of getting content out. So the first thing we knew that we needed was a web interface, somewhere where teachers could go and get these resources. We also wanted widgets. So we wanted, if schools were using learning platform, if they were using their own internet, their own websites, or if teachers were just using their own local machines, we needed widgets that could drop into different interfaces so that they could use the search tool and access the resources that we'd collect. We knew that it was going to be very important to work closely with the learning platforms. So if teachers were being encouraged to work inside the learning platforms, we knew that access to our resources had to be embedded in the learning platform, so that from within the learning platform, teachers could search for content, bring that through, and create learning experiences for the users. And authoring tools. The final component was that if teachers were being encouraged to create resources, to create their own resources, then we needed to embed our repository inside the authoring tools so that they could access animations, images, interactive games, quizzes, activities, and build learning experiences around those. So we knew that this was pretty much what we wanted. And we knew that for that, we were going to need to work on standards. So we were going to need open standards for the exchange of metadata. We were going to need standards for content packaging. It was the only way that we were going to be able to move this forward was by making sure that everything was interoperable, everything was linked into each other so that content could be shared. So it took us a while to kind of decide on the strategy and decide what we wanted to do. But then we started looking around for a technology to use to actually do this piece of work. And I'm involved in a number of different groups across Europe, and I looked at lots and lots of different systems. I looked at systems that were in use across Europe, systems in use in Asia, systems in use in the States, all over the place. And interestingly, it's almost exactly 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago in September, here in Lisbon. I was at a European conference here, and I met somebody called Manuela Lara from Santillana, which is a Spanish publishing house. And she presented to me an initiative that was happening in Spain. And as she talked about this initiative, which was called Agrega, everything she said, I felt, that's my design. That's what I want to do. That's exactly how I want my system to function. And it turned out that the system that had been created, the Agrega system, was a perfect match to what we wanted. And then I got very excited when she said that it was available under EU public license, and so we would be able to take it and work with this system. And we very, very quickly started speaking to Indra and to Spain and said, could we work together, please, and could we use your system? And so that's what we did. And we spent quite a long time working with the system, and we've made quite a few changes to it because we've been able, because of the license it's under, we've been able to change the system. And you'll see, if anybody's familiar with the Agrega system, you'll see that ours looks very different and things have changed. And that's one of the beauties of the system, is that we've been able to localize it to our own needs. So this is our system. This is what we have. And it's basically, it is a repository. So we've collected all of the content together, all of the resources together. We've attached metadata to them, and then we have a search so that teachers, learners can find the resources. We've made some changes, so we have in here search filters to make it easier. So instead of going to Google and getting 2 million results, you can actually select by curriculum area and things like that. And then when you go in, you have a very nice interface where you have more information. Teachers can rate resources, and I can see what it looks like. And then I go through an authentication layer. Now, in the UK, we also have a system, well, it's a federation known as the UK Access Management Federation. This is a UK-wide federation which is supporting the use of the Shibboleth standard for single sign-on authentication. So we've adopted Shibboleth. This is, again, another change that we made to the system. And so we have a single sign-on system. And then we go inside. And from inside here, I can do lots of things. So I can preview a resource, fully interactive preview. This we felt was absolutely essential. It was one of the things that we wanted and that we liked. Because I was a teacher myself for 12 years, a long time ago. And as great as Google is for finding things, if you have to go into every single resource, download every single resource to try it out, is it any good? Yes, it is. No, it's not. Try the next one. We needed to have an effective preview system with fully interactive preview, which we have here. That was an important thing for us. And then the next important thing for us was the download. And this was one of the key components for us that was important about this system. And that is that one of the problems we'd had in the UK was the lack of standardization with standards. We had lots of standards, but no standardization. So lots of standards, but on an implementation level, everybody was using different things. All the different learning platforms were using different things. It was the same with metadata and the same with content packaging. Nobody at the beginning, when we'd made the early investment in the technology, nobody had clarified what people were supposed to do about metadata or about content packaging. And so what we needed in this system was something that would work with any learning platform and that would work with any standard. And so that was what we found, that we can download content in any of these different formats. Or, if a teacher wants to actually modify and change resources, as teachers do, they can also just take it as a raw resource and make the changes to it. So we loved this system. It was great. It was absolutely perfect for us. And then on top of all of that, it had all of the nice Web 2 things and the things that we thought were important for generating communities. So teachers could rate resources, they could add comments to resources, they could send resources to a friend, bookmark, lots of additional functionality that we really thought would support the use of the system. So we thought we'd cracked it. We thought, that's it, great. We've got all the content, we've got a fantastic system, it meets the requirements for metadata standards, it meets the requirements for content packaging, integration with learning platforms, fantastic. So we went to the ministry, to the Department for Education, and we said, okay, will you pay for us to deliver this system? And what we will then do is, we will make it available to all the regional bodies, and because the regional body's responsibility is to look after the local authorities, they will pass it to the local authorities, who will pass it to the schools, who will pass it to the teachers and learners. But the UK government was ahead of the global recession, because they said to us 3 years ago, no, is what they said. They said, you need to find a sustainable model, a model that is self-funding, where we're not involved. So we will support you, but we won't fund it. So we went for model number 2. And model number 2 was that the National Education Network would fund the project. And then it would get passed through the local authorities, through the schools, and onto the users. And we've spent the last 2 years working with the National Education Network, negotiating deals, working this out. And we've had some success in some regions. It's starting to move and it's starting to get down and it's starting to flow. But it hasn't been a success. In that respect, it hasn't been a success. And we have just moved to a new model now where anybody now can work directly with us. So whether that's regional bodies, local authorities, schools, even down to individual teachers, learners, ambitious parents who want to support their children at home. Anybody can work directly with us. We're doing a lot more work on international partnerships, not just for international partnerships to take resources out of the system, but also to bring resources in, so for the complete exchange of resources in both directions. And this is the model we're working on at the moment. I can't tell you if it's going to succeed or not, because we only launched it about a month ago. So ask me in a year, and I'll tell you. However, as we all know, we are moving into a new era across Europe, an era of austerity and lack of funds. And so I thought it might be interesting to just take a very quick look at tomorrow and what we're thinking about in terms of the future and the way we can move with this project. The first thing that we're doing is changing the model from charging end users to charging integrators. So my personal belief is that the model that we've had based on that triangle is never going to work really, really well. And it reminds me a little bit of what Senor Roberto said about the top-down model is an old model. It's not going to work anymore. And you need to come in at the bottom and get straight to the end users. We need systems that are open and free. You don't pay for Facebook. You don't pay for Twitter. You don't pay for any of those systems. We need something that is completely open and free. We can no longer charge end users. And so in order to do that, we're looking at things like bringing commercial content through the system. We have a marketplace. We have an outlet. If we bring commercial content in, maybe we can support the project that way. Looking at advertising, very focused on educational content, but it's a possibility. Moving to a freemium service, where it's free to a normal user for a basic service, but you have a premium service with additional value. Making more of our ability to collect behavioral metadata. Behavioral metadata, the number of clicks, what teachers like, what learners like. which local authorities are more active than others, which schools are more active than others. That kind of metadata, that kind of behavioral metadata is starting to have value in Web3 and in the moves towards a more centralized system. So all of those are things that we're looking at. So to close, and I think I have about 1 minute left, I would just very quickly like to just summarize the things that I think we've done well and lessons that can be taken away, and then the things that we've not done so well. So what we've done well, I think we chose a great repository engine. It has worked for us, and I think it is so well developed and so complete that it will be future-proof. It will see us into the future as we change our models and we change our delivery. We have, through the system, been able to establish a common platform for content packaging interoperability, something that was lacking before. We've been able to establish a common platform for metadata and metadata exchange, not just within our own suppliers in the UK, but internationally as well. And we have aggregated and pulled together lots and lots of great content. So I think we've achieved some real positives. Where we've not done so well is that we didn't explore alternative business models soon enough. I think you need to move really, really fast in this day and age, and we stuck for too long on a business model that was never really going to deliver to the end users. The power needed to be given to the end users. They needed to be the ones who were accessing directly, instead of through the schools, through the local authorities. And as a result of that, we failed to engage with our users as much as we should have done. My time is out. I hope that there is something there that means something to some of you. I know that the situation here is slightly different in Portugal, but hopefully there will be some lessons there that will be of interest to you. Thank you very much. And if anybody would like more information, there are some booklets outside.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I think we are addressing some of these issues in Portugal. And now I would like to gostaria de apresentar a todos, e com o embalo, a Michelle Selinger, que é atualmente diretora de Education Practice Global Public Sector Internet Business Solutions Group da Cisco, com mais de 25 anos de experiência na docência. Focaliza hoje em dia o seu trabalho na transformação da atividade educativa em todas as áreas do sistema de ensino formal. Antes de ingressar no Internet Business Solution Group, era responsável da Cisco pelos investimentos sociais na educação, incluindo a iniciativa global na área da educação promovida pelo Fórum Económico Mundial. Tem vindo a colaborar com governos um pouco por todo o mundo nas suas estratégias para a educação. Foi ainda diretora do Center for New Technologies Research and Education da Universidade de Warwick e membro do Europe 2005 Action Plan Advisory Group. Michelle.
Thank you. And I think the world has changed, Roberto. I think I'm going to probably show where it's changing and how it can continue to change. But thank you for inviting me here, and thank you to the person who I'm buying my house from not being ready to sell it to me today. Otherwise I would be moving. So that's why I'm here. So I'm going to talk about engaging the learner and how we can find ways to engage the learner more effectively in education and in engaging the learner, engaging families and communities. I want to broaden it beyond families because I think the community has a great involvement in how students learn and how well prepared they are to be a member of their community. And we were talking earlier about the national curriculum having a regional as well as a national flavour. I think we need to go beyond that and also think about the rural and the inner city needs, because students who live in rural areas have different needs from students who live in cities. So it's about individualising curriculum, but making sure that people have the basics for taking them to the next stage of their careers and their lives. I was at a debate last week at the Oxford Union, which was very interesting. It was about informal learning. And there are a number of things that emerged from that that made me think about, when do we really learn? I'm not talking about in schools, I'm just talking about generally. That includes schools and college and university. It's when we really need to know, when we really need to know something. It's when we're stuck. And being stuck is great because you want to know more. You want to get out of that unstuck position. I used to be a maths teacher, and if a child said to me, I'm stuck, I said, great, now we can do some real mathematics. Because they knew they were stuck, they wanted to move forward. And it's when we have to choose, and we do that in life, we always have choices. And sometimes we make the wrong choice and we learn by that. But we have to know, we need to weigh up those choices, and we need to learn what is the best choice to make. And I think we also learn when we make a mistake. So let's think about that in the context of school and curriculum and assessment. I think what we need now is a new pedagogy with learners at the centre and learners supported by their family and supported by the community. And those learners need to be collaborative. We don't learn on our own, we learn together. I think long gone are the days when you sit in a darkened room and do your learning. When we learn online, we learn with others. The students that we collaborate with as students, we collaborate with them in the classroom, we collaborate with them online. The young people today are natural collaborators. So we need to encourage that in the classroom. Learning needs to be authentic. And I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by authentic learning in a moment. But authentic to me means not real. When I was a maths teacher, we had this movement in the 80s called real maths. And real maths meant, instead of dividing 5 into 40, you had a lift that took 5 people, and how many times would it have to go up and down if there were 40 people going in the lift? The problem is, it doesn't account for the pregnant woman with the pram. So that's not real. It's not a real problem. A real problem is when it's real to you, and that's why I talk about authentic learning, not real learning. So it has to be authentic. It has to really be something you want to know about, and therefore it has to be relevant. And it has to be practical. You have to have a use for it. It doesn't mean that you have to get your hands dirty, but it has to be practical. It has to have some relevance and some practical applications in your life. This is an example about making learning authentic. This is webcams. When I was a young child, we at school, and we had the hen laying her eggs. We never saw the chicks hatch. We only ever saw the chicks hatch the next day, and it was too late. We missed it. We missed all the activity. Here, with a webcam, you can take time sequences. Look at the discussions, look at the debate. This is real, this is your hen in your classroom having the chicks in your classroom. Think how exciting that is to young people. It's relevant, it's authentic, it's collaborative because you discuss it, and it helps your learning. And for me, it shows the difference in measurement between measurement in science and measurement in mathematics. You can tell I used to be a maths teacher. Measurement in science is very different from maths, but we put it all together. So lots can come out of that in the curriculum that really can start to change the way you engage your students. Now we need to bring technology into the equation. And how does technology make a difference in this new pedagogy? Well, certainly we can get students to pursue an interest. And with resources like the National Data Resource Bank, it helps students pursue an interest, but they can also go beyond and out there. When someone has a passion and has an interest, they will go as far as they need to in order to do it. But we have to make sure that the constraints of the curriculum are such that they can have that time to do that in school as well as outside school. If we tie the curriculum down so much, then we're not going to foster the curiosity and the creativity that I talk about in the left-hand corner. Because the nice thing about the internet is if you have a question, it's easy to try and find the answer. You Google it, you go to a data bank, you go and talk to an expert. You find a way to answer your own questions. So you can pursue your interests very easily once you have technology. And then you can create some content. Because one of the best ways to know whether you've understood something is to create a presentation or some media for someone else. Make a video, make a documentary, do a multimedia presentation, write a story, do a podcast, do a vodcast. Lots of different ways in which you can convey your understanding. Yet we're still constrained by an assessment system that doesn't value anything but the written word and a little bit of practical work. So we have this technology. We're starting to see it being used in higher education, where we don't see students who have to just write their examinations. They do have the opportunity to demonstrate their understanding in many ways. The other thing that's great is it produces access to experts. The teacher is no longer the only expert in the classroom. Gone are the days when you, as a student, only have the teacher and the library. You have so much more now. And you can access experts. You can engage them in conversations. You can go to their websites. There's always somebody who has spoken to them, who knows some information about the expert you can go to. You can pull them in as a teacher. A lovely example in Australia, there was children were interested in dinosaurs, and the teacher didn't know an awful lot about dinosaurs. So over a video conference, she brought in a curator from the local museum. He didn't have to leave his building, and he had a whole collection of dinosaur bones. Those children were mesmerized. They were excited because suddenly it became real to them. It became authentic for them because this was an expert who knew about dinosaurs, and it wasn't second, third, or fourth hand from their teacher. So technology helps to provide that relevance and that interest and fosters that creativity that we need in order to compete in the global society. And we don't have to remain in our classrooms anymore. We can collaborate outside with other students in other schools, either in Lisbon or in Brazil. And Diogo, the Dialogue Cafe, which is a type of video conferencing called telepresence that we have recently launched, where ordinary people can go and have conversations from Lisbon to Rio. It is Rio? Yes. Rio de Janeiro. Oh, I nearly got that wrong. And yeah, well, this is not a sell job for Dialogue Cafe. But yeah, you can have conversations in Portuguese with people in Rio, or you can talk in English to people in Amsterdam. And you don't have to read on the internet what it's like to live in those countries. You can ask somebody firsthand. You can ask them the questions that you want to know. And the other thing is you can bring the community in. You don't have to just learn. You know, we talk about making the curriculum contextual and relevant. We can do that by bringing the community in. You want to talk about nursing. You want to talk about being a fireman. Then it's always difficult to bring those experts in, but you can bring them in virtually, and they can talk to the children. And they can understand about, in Australia, I've just been in 3 years in Australia, so bushfires became very, very close to my heart, especially with those terrible bushfires in Victoria. But you get somebody who's worked in the bushfire talking to those children. My goodness, that brings it home. That really makes it relevant. So technology is really helping to make this new pedagogy relevant. I want to show you a video. It's really interesting that this publication is what schools are going to be like in 2025, because I did a documentary with some children in a primary school in Victoria, in Melbourne, and this is what they think they're going to be doing in 2025. Do we have sound?
I could imagine using the internet with no keyboard or mouse and interacting with other people online.
It's not showing, it's showing on here but not on there. Why not? Technician, please. Why isn't it showing on here, please? And you need to change the resolution, I think. anybody? This is such a lovely video, and it's just 30 seconds, but I think it just captures so much of what I was saying. It's playing on here, but not on there. You need to change the resolution, I think. Maybe we can play later, after the break. No. Okay. All right. Okay, don't worry. We'll have to leave it. Oh, there it is. It's there. It's working. Fantastic. Thank you. You're a star.
I could imagine using the internet with no keyboard or mouse and interacting with other people online. I wonder how far I am from the Earth. I wonder how long it will take me to get here by car.
Learning can take place at home or at the park.
I think learning will take place at home in the future because we'll have a lot more learning devices so we can stay connected with each other 24/7.
Learning can take place at home and the library.
I think that learning will take place with people all around the world, not just from people from our school.
In the future, I can imagine school being open later and earlier in the morning, not just from 9 o'clock to 3:30.
In the future, we believe learning can take place
Anywhere?
Anytime.
And with anyone.
Important to get their names on there. I need to go back to my presentation, yeah. It's okay. So I'll get through it. Yeah, that's fine, yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad we got it to work. I don't know why it didn't work in there. So really, I just want to sum up really what it was about learning and technology. It's really that these fragments of knowledge are more readily available. And it's just so great to hear about your data resource because that makes it even easier now. And it's the ability to bring those fragments together when they're needed, which, you know, keeps interest, keeps motivation. It gives you an audience for discussion that's really an authentic audience. Your teacher's not an authentic audience. If you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. Your teacher expects you to get it wrong because otherwise there's no job for her to mark it and correct it. So having an authentic audience actually makes your work better because you take more care and you more time over it. What we're seeing, though, is a much more of this commingling of social and intellectual life. So that students don't leave the school behind when they go, that they take their learning with them, and it mixes up with their social networks. So once they go onto Facebook, they might point to something that's part of their learning, as well as that's part of their social activity. The opportunities are endless there when you start to mingle these two together. You get the opportunities for greater curiosity and for creativity and innovation. And we're seeing a real move in serious games. We've recognized and harnessed how the impact that games have on students' learning. Just watch any child playing a game. My goodness, I wish they put that into the maths lessons that I used to teach, because they don't mind if they make a mistake. They're just learning from their mistakes. They're trying new ideas. They're using metacognition. They're discussing with each other, what would happen if I did this? What would happen if I did that? Let's try that. Let's try this. We pull that in together into serious games. My goodness, the learning is going to improve, that we will have students getting their degrees when they're 15. And this is the learner's world today. This is a university student who is doing a chemistry course. She doesn't rely on her classroom lecture. She relies on so many other things. And we have to allow our students to taste that. then we need to allow some sort of control, otherwise they'll go all over the place. But at the same time, we need to expose them to the possibilities, and we need to find ways to harness that and bring it in so that we cover the basic curriculum and make sure that their learning is robust and sound and useful for the next stage in their learning. And we have all these tools for engagement. We have everything from telephones to virtual classrooms to video conferencing to video capture on small handheld cameras, which is what those children did in that video, to desktop video conferencing, to the full-blown video conferencing and telepresence. There are so many tools to engage outside the school and to really pursue interests in new ways. And the other thing is there are sites where you can now link to the community. This is an example from America, from one Cleveland in America, where students are learning about science through watching surgery, laparoscopic surgery, in a hospital down the road. And we actually saw a gastric bypass being done, and the surgeon talking to the learners while they were doing this operation. So they learnt about obesity, they learnt about operations, they learnt about what it is to work in a hospital, they learnt about science, they learnt about the intestines. They learnt so much from just observing something through through this video conference, but they went beyond the curriculum. And that's the point I want to make, that if you can go beyond the curriculum becomes easy, the tests become easy. But we need to just make sure that we leave the space in the curriculum to do this. So what we need is to put technology into an education vision. We can't put it out on the side. We can't put it out to on its own, because it doesn't work. It has to have a very, very definite education model where the curriculum is contained, where it's relevant, where parents and the community are involved, where the learning spaces are designed to allow for this new form of learning, this new pedagogy, where the curriculum, the assessments are mapped together to make sure that this can happen, and so on. And then you can look at the network infrastructure and the access devices. It all needs to come together, but it needs to stem from the education model. And we need to make sure that all the 21st century skills that students need are around this. So we reduce the core subjects, we reduce the basics to enable students to be prepared and ready for the 21st century. And this is an American initiative which I commend you to look at. So really what we want to do is we want to teach students to learn to know, and that's the sort of knowledge, the explicit knowledge, the main curriculum. But we want them to learn to be. We want them to learn to be through this informal, tacit knowledge that they get from pursuing their understanding and their learning with others. And at the end of the day, they learn to become who they will become. And this is the skills that they will need to take forward for the rest of their career. So I'm going to skip that because I'm running out of time. So really, what are the implications for teachers? Because at the end of the day, if teachers don't change and don't take on the new pedagogy, nothing will change. So we need to get them to think of how they become orchestrators rather than controllers of the learning environment. So this is my plea to you, is think about how you bring all these things together and how you continue to prepare teachers to be the teachers of the new pedagogy in the new order, and then the world will change. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. E agora passo a palavra ao Hélder Lopes, licenciado em Engenharia e Gestão Industrial pela Universidade de Aveiro, trabalhou nas empresas Alcobre S.A. e na Philips, onde desempenhou as funções de Diretor de Qualidade e Desenvolvimento de Produto. Desenvolveu carreira internacional e especializou-se sobretudo na aplicação de ferramentas avançadas de qualidade na gestão de processos, nos processos de desenvolvimento de novos produtos e na gestão de projetos de industrialização de produtos. É formador e consultor nas áreas de Business Process Management e Business Processing Outsourcing.
Sr. Presidente da APDC, Engenheiro Roberto Carneiro, obrigado pelo convite que foi formulado ao Example para poder falar durante breves minutos sobre este projeto. Meus senhores, minhas senhoras, nasceu em Portugal o primeiro consórcio, o primeiro agrupamento de empresas com oferta integrada de soluções na área das tecnologias de informação e comunicação aplicadas para o setor da educação. É importante referir, no fundo, o contexto em que tudo isto surge. Já ouvimos hoje aqui falar do plano tecnológico para a educação. Temos que remontar um bocadinho mais atrás e perceber que houve iniciativas que foram lançadas anteriormente e, portanto, a ideia de termos um computador para um aluno resultou numa coisa substancialmente mais ampla. Deixem-me também referir, digamos, de onde é que nós partimos, o que é que nós vemos no futuro e onde é que queremos chegar, falando, sobretudo, sobre aquilo que nós pensamos que venha a ser a educação no século XXI. Em primeiro tudo, tem a ver com o espaço escola. Portanto, o espaço escola que nós projetamos para o século XXI é, sobretudo, um espaço acolhedor onde os alunos e demais comunidade educativa gostará de estar necessariamente. É um espaço que, forçosamente, pensamos ter que desenvolver algumas competências que achamos serem prioritárias no século que agora está a andar. Sobretudo ao nível da inovação e da aprendizagem, competências também nas áreas e no domínio da informação, dos mídia e da tecnologia e, sobretudo também, as competências sociais para o desenvolvimento da vida, da nossa carreira enquanto elementos, parte da sociedade e também enquanto elementos de companhias, de organizações, de empresas em geral, portanto, na vertente mais profissional. Isto é, sobretudo, o desenvolvimento de competências de caráter comportamental que permitam, sobretudo, às crianças e depois mais tarde aos profissionais saberem estar num certo contexto, numa certa situação. Pensamos também que o paradigma de ensino não está a mudar, já mudou. E, portanto, aquela imagem da escola antiga que nós tínhamos e que hoje dizemos que é a escola do futuro, já não é mais a escola do futuro, é a escola do presente. E, portanto, hoje o enfoque é colocado, sobretudo, nos alunos. Há uma proliferação de conteúdos multimédia, de conteúdos interativos, suportados naturalmente pelas tecnologias que estão ao dispor de toda a gente. E, portanto, nós hoje estamos naquilo que se chama uma aldeia global. Portanto, o conhecimento hoje está acessível de qualquer ponto, em todo lado, e, portanto, o processo de aprendizagem naturalmente transbordou as paredes da escola e hoje faz parte de toda a envolvente. Por isso é que é importante colocar o enfoque no aluno, por isso é que o professor tem hoje em dia um papel completamente diferente e por isso é que hoje se fala tanto no trazer para dentro da escola, no fundo, para trazer para dentro dos processos de ensino e aprendizagem toda a comunidade educativa, ligada sobretudo à escola e, em particular, os pais, as famílias. Portanto, também já foi hoje aqui referido que as ofertas no futuro, aquilo que nós vamos ter que providenciar, fornecer às pessoas que estamos hoje a educar, vai ser cada vez mais um ensino, uma educação de 1 para 1, customizada. As necessidades de cada aluno hoje são absolutamente distintas. Portanto, aquele conceito de ensino massificado em que temos uma figura que sabe tudo e que depois passa esse conhecimento da mesma forma a todas as outras pessoas, a todas as outras crianças que estão ali, Hoje em dia já não é bem assim, porque, como vocês podem imaginar, as crianças hoje facilmente conseguem chegar ao conhecimento e, portanto, em algumas áreas muito específicas do conhecimento mais genérico, eu diria que elas sabem mesmo mais do que às vezes o próprio professor. E, portanto, o professor aqui tem um papel de orientador, tem um papel de facilitador do processo de aprendizagem, mais do que propriamente o papel de ensinar algo. Portanto, aqui acreditamos sinceramente que o ensino, mais tarde ou mais cedo, é formatado à medida de cada indivíduo. E, portanto, só para resumir, as competências críticas para o século XXI assentam essencialmente em 3 eixos fundamentais. É o desenvolvimento das competências críticas propriamente ditas, é a mudança do paradigma de ensino e caminhar para um modelo de ensino que se oriente, digamos, para um modelo de 1 para 1, um conteúdo para uma entidade que está a aprender. Relativamente ao example, deixem-me agora também referir como é que tudo isto surge. Portanto, tem a ver essencialmente com opções estratégicas tomadas em Portugal, pelo governo português, que foram determinantes na criação de uma nova geração de estudantes que está neste momento a viver e que vai construir a sociedade do futuro. Resumindo apenas algumas dessas medidas, a banda larga nas escolas e a ligação em fibra óptica já na atual fase, um computador a um aluno, o estímulo à criação e à proliferação dos conteúdos digitais e a criação de ferramentas de comunicação para pais e alunos. Portanto, aquilo a que vulgarmente nós chamamos das plataformas de ensino-aprendizagem, as plataformas de comunicação, as próprias redes sociais. E estes foram de facto os drivers que permitiram em Portugal a criação de uma indústria de tecnologias de informação e de comunicação que não só suportou o projeto do plano tecnológico em Portugal, como também criou oportunidades além fronteiras. E, portanto, isto resulta num reconhecimento internacional de tudo aquilo que foi feito cá em Portugal. Deixem-me só referir algumas das citações que já foram feitas ao longo do tempo. Portanto, a Toshiba distinguiu em 2007 o projeto A Escola com o Best European Project Award. Portanto, isto é uma distinção internacional a coisas que se fazem cá em Portugal. O próprio presidente da Intel diz que a decisão portuguesa foi uma decisão acertada e que, portanto, enquanto a Intel faz parte também deste processo, naturalmente ele está bastante orgulhoso por tudo aquilo que foi implementado e conseguido. O Steve Ballmer, presidente executivo da Microsoft, manifesta também o seu agrado por ver que aquilo que foi feito em Portugal pode ser extrapolado para a escala global. E o Bernd Bischoff, o CEO da Fujitsu Siemens, esteve em Lisboa quando da entrega do computador 50.000 e, portanto, manifestou também o seu agrado e o seu prazer em estar connosco e participar e fazer parte deste projeto igualmente. A própria Microsoft, e é a linha que está cá mais em baixo, portanto, em janeiro de 2009, em Londres, referiu perante vários governantes dos países europeus que o projeto A Escola é um projeto exemplar. O Example surge precisamente é o prólogo do programa É a Escola, que resulta de uma iniciativa governamental feita pelo governo português, suportada pelo Plano Tecnológico para a Educação e, portanto, como eu vos referi há bocado, este próprio Plano Tecnológico e o projeto A Escolas potenciaram o desenvolvimento de uma indústria em Portugal. E, portanto, a indústria, perante esse cenário, tinha uma de duas opções. Ou assumia claramente uma posição comercial e, portanto, representava marcas estrangeiras, ou então acreditava na sua capacidade de inovação e de criação de produtos e apresentava perante aquele desafio com que foi confrontada uma solução produzida cá em Portugal e com valor acrescentado cá em Portugal e com conhecimento fixado cá em Portugal também. Não querendo tomar aqui partido de ninguém em particular, deixem-me referir apenas o caso, por exemplo, da JP Sacouto e do projeto Magalhães. Creio que sabem que hoje a JP Sacouto é, dentro da indústria que produz os Classmate, é a empresa líder mundial e, portanto, está naturalmente apadrinhada dentro da Intel. Temos também empresas que produzem em Portugal quadros interativos de última geração, portanto são quadros ópticos, táteis, com superfícies cerâmicas altamente resistentes e adequados, portanto, aos alunos e às crianças poderem utilizar aquilo não só como quadro normal, mas também resistentes ao ponto de terem uma garantia que é praticamente vitalícia. A própria Critical Links, que desenvolveu um conceito de appliance, portanto é um objeto que funciona através de IP e que numa só solução, num só objeto, fornece vários serviços, não só a nível de gestão de escola, serviços de fornecimento de conteúdos e serviços também de fornecimento de serviços web. A própria Nautilus, que trabalha na área do mobiliário escolar, é neste momento a empresa mais distinguida lá fora e inclusive o seu mobiliário, que é conhecido pelo Netboard 2.1, foi recentemente distinguido pelo World Dirac Award 2010, portanto é um prémio instituído por um organismo não governamental baseado na Suíça que distingue, no fundo, aquelas empresas que têm as ideias mais inovadoras e mais adequadas para a utilização nas escolas. E, portanto, nós temos exemplos em número e em qualidade que sobram para justificar precisamente este agrupamento de empresas. O ACE agrupa cerca de 40 empresas da área das TIC em Portugal que têm oferta de soluções de TIC, repito, são soluções, não são produtos tecnológicos, e trabalham em vários eixos que vai desde os computadores à sala de aula, à própria infraestrutura, ao conteúdo de informação, a equipamentos e atividades, e nos casos em que tal se justifica, portanto, há serviços de estratégia, comunicação e gestão global. Portanto, o que nós estamos a ver aqui é, no fundo, um esquemático da oferta do Example, que vai desde uma rede exterior ao ambiente escolar, ao próprio ambiente escolar e também, dentro do ambiente escolar, ao ponto de sala de aula. Estou praticamente a terminar e de referir apenas que as várias associadas deste consórcio já têm uma presença industrial em cerca de 50 países, estão aqui representados apenas alguns. Há países onde várias agrupadas têm presença em simultâneo. No entanto, gostaria de referir que o Example, ou as associadas do Example, irão suportar a implementação de um projeto que é o eSchool International Network of Digital Schools. O que é que isto significa? Portanto, o governo português, juntamente com a União Internacional das Telecomunicações, assinou no passado dia 29 de setembro um acordo que vai resultar numa rede internacional de escolas digitais ligadas entre si, e estas redes ou estas escolas, estes países são selecionados sobretudo com critério de carência de tecnologias. O que se pretende aqui é, no fundo, promover um projeto de responsabilidade social e fazer com que países menos desenvolvidos possam rapidamente chegar, através da ligação em rede, a uma comunidade global e fazer parte de. Deixem-me também dizer que, exatamente nesta semana e na próxima, e isto também é o corolário deste acordo entre o governo português e a OIT, o Example já está a instalar as duas primeiras salas de aula, que são salas piloto. é no México, no estado, na cidade de Guadalajara, e, portanto, a escola selecionada é a Escola General Manuel Diegues, que fica situada precisamente no centro histórico e que é um edifício com mais de 300 anos, que foi, em tempos, um convento carmelita. Funciona a 2 níveis, ensino primário e ensino secundário, e são escolas, ou é uma escola frequentada, sobretudo, por alunos da classe média-baixa, mas que já registra níveis muito interessantes de sucesso escolar. E, portanto, aquilo que nós queremos é potenciar ainda mais esta aprendizagem e esta qualidade destas crianças. Termino dizendo que, com tudo aquilo que foi feito em Portugal e com todo este esforço que há concertado também por parte da indústria e, em particular, por este ACE, pelo Example, Portugal tem naturalmente a obrigação de criar um mercado de pelo menos mais de 1 ou 2 milhões de alunos, e temos todas as condições para, num espaço de 2, 3 anos, termos em Portugal, efetivamente, a melhor escola do mundo. Não há, neste momento, razões para que tal não aconteça. Temos todas as ferramentas disponíveis e, portanto, os recursos estão aí, o investimento foi feito e temos também, nos diversos níveis, nos diversos serviços, as competências essenciais para que tal venha a ser verdade. Obrigado.